Good evening. Welcome to another installment of our Facebook live stream presentations. I am Jim Crescitelli, Director of the Winter Garden Heritage Foundation, and we're here tonight at the Winter Garden Heritage Museum with retired Winter Garden Fire Chief Matt McGrew. Thank you so much for coming up. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having us here.
Pleasure. We're going to hear Matt's story and the story of the area regarding fire safety and anything that Matt was involved in. And there was a lot. Matt was involved in a lot of great causes, which you'll hear about. He's done a lot of great things for the fire department, he and his crew, and we are quite fortunate to have had him all of these years. His years in fire service were actually, if you count all of the county, he's a 42-year veteran of the fire service in Central Florida and a long-standing EMS advocate. So that's a great pedigree, and we can't wait to hear about it. We'd love to have you share your story. So, begin where you like. You're going to tell me, because we're learning too. How did you, you came to Florida. You start like with your Florida family beginnings and what brought you to fire safety.
I'm happy to be here. I hope I can hold a candle to some of your previous guests that I've seen.
Thank you.
But yeah, our family moved here. I was born in Marietta, Ohio, so not a local per se, but as close to local as you can get. Moved here in 1965. I was only about 5 years old. So we started my education here, first grade. And our family located to Orla Vista, right down the street, just about 12 miles from here. And the little area called Orla Vista, and went to elementary school in Orla Vista.
It was rural back
then. And
huh?
all the local schools over there, Robbinswood Junior High School at the time, Evans High School, and graduated from there, and had a couple buddies that started working in the fire service. And that's kind of how I got to know the fire service. It wasn't something I had planned on doing. We had a large family. I have 4 other siblings. There's 4 boys and a girl in our family. And so, you know, we didn't have a lot, but we thought we had everything we needed. You know, we had a great childhood growing up. And what kind of brought us to Florida was just the weather. You know, we lived in Ohio, obviously, and my mother, for the most part, was a stay-at-home mom. She had been a stewardess earlier on prior to being married, and around the time her and my dad got married. And he was an educator in music, and he was also a professional musician. So we came down here. My mother at one time was flying out of Miami, and she had a friend that was renting a house in Windermere, of all places, for the summer. And so when we relocated, we actually got to stay right on Main Street in a house. I think it was called the Kernahan House. Some people would know that, and it's since been rebuilt. But so we got to stay right on the Butler chain of lakes. And in addition to, you know, my father being an educator and a musician, he was an avid fisherman. So that's another connection to West Orange County. I remember him bringing us out in a john boat to Kelso on Lake Butler.
Sure.
You know, which now is only about half a mile from my house where we live now.
So that was built by the Scottish gentleman.
Yeah. So that's what got us here, and we grew up right down the street, and all my siblings then ended up kind of getting there, going their own way and moving away. And because I got attached to the fire service early on, I got hired in 1978 by Orla Vista Fire Control District. And I brought a patch and some pictures we're going to go through. So that was a small fire department that was governed by basically your voting district. So it was very odd shaped. We went from the Orla Vista area, and we went south on a Popcove Island Road to Bay Hill. So it was kind of a rags to riches kind of thing. We had a station in Orla Vista that was, you know, kind of falling apart. And then in 1979, they built almost a $1.5 million state-of-the-art fire station that's behind the 7-Eleven, the Bay Hill 7-Eleven to this day. So that was my introduction to the fire service, because catacorner to where I lived, on the street I lived in Orla Vista, was the Orla Vista fire chief. So, you know, he tended to recruit some of the locals to
kind of stoked your interest,
to come to work. I mean, originally I got out of high school and I was going to Seminole College for hospitality. I thought I was going to be in the hotel motel business, and
helped with people skills eventually.
But then, you know, you're working 40 hours a week, and my friends that went to work for the fire service, they're working one day and they get 2 days off. So I started hanging out down at the fire station, and lo and behold, they had an opening, and they had a little physical ability test that you did. You know, you had to run 1.5 miles in under 8 minutes, and then be able to do certain calisthenics. And I went through the process, and they offered me a job in 1978, and the pay was like $8,900 a year.
Wow.
In 19.
How old were you when you started with Orla Vista, Mass?
Well, I would have been 19 years old.
19,
yeah, right
wow.
out of high school.
Wow.
So because I was locked in, I stayed here. The rest of my family kind of dispersed, and I was here taking care of all the people, everybody else that I went to school with kind of moved away and took care of them. Then in 1981, the Orange County government consolidated all those small fire districts. Every community had their own fire station. You know, there was Pine Hills and Pine Castle and Taft and Zellwood and Orla Vista.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was 14, and it was like kind of a culture shock to bring us all together in the beginning. 14 fire districts, and Orla Vista was probably one of the lowest paid, you know, and so we had a lot of kind of catching up to do, but it turned out to be, I think, better for the.
There must have been a lot of ideas
county.
exchanged from the shore,
Yeah.
different levels of fireness.
So I got to stay there in the Orla Vista area and served the community for 7 years, and started going through my promotional processes, and you know, worked with a lot of great people, and had a lot of good experiences, and you know, it was one of those ones where, you know, you worked hard and you played hard. You know, I think if you'd asked some of my supervisors back then, they probably would have told you I was a handful, you know, kind of a know-it-all, and eventually, you know, that served to kind of get me back to where they brought me into administration to try to see if I could really make those things come to fruition.
Right.
So
use your skills. Yep.
So during that time, working out of Station 30, which is what it's called now, of Orla Vista, which is now Orange County Station 30, we actually were the, and I became a paramedic early, 1980, 81 time frame, when paramedics were fairly new in the fire service. And we had the only rescue truck on the west side of Orange County.
Really?
For unincorporated Orange County, which meant we responded to a lot of calls out here. So I wasn't a stranger to West Orange County. We would run calls out off of Avalon Road. Sometimes coming from Orla Vista might take us 30, 35 minutes to get to those calls. And
way down to the Grove.
and I can remember, you know, working calls and transporting to the old West Orange Hospital right down here around the corner by Health Central Hospital on Dillard. Yeah. Wow. And back then they had, you know, we had a few paramedics in our department, and we worked with West Orange Ambulance. They had the West Orange Memorial Hospital Ambulance Service, and they were a great team.
Yeah, we've got photos of some of their cars.
Yeah, Bob Langfeld, who started it, and that's really what encouraged me to become a paramedic. We had a lieutenant paramedic that worked for us, Byron Rhodes, who worked also with West Orange Ambulance at one time. And just to see the amount of effort they put into every call, it just really, you know, kind of struck me that they would go to all that effort to try to save somebody, which in some cases looked like it was going to be a futile effort, but yet sometimes they save lives.
That's when you realize what's inside of you, when you realize, this is important. Yeah, any life. Yeah. You're right.
Yeah. So then after it went countywide, we started moving around, and eventually I was transferred to a fire station out by SeaWorld and worked there for another 7 years in the field. And then followed that up, I worked another 4 or 5 years out of a main station off of Oak Ridge Road on a tower truck. And then again, about that time was the time that my wife and I found some property in West Orange County. In 1997, 98 time frames, designed a house ourselves, started building it ourselves. And I was still working for the county, and actually it was a firefighter from a buddy of mine. His name was Buddy, and I had a group of firefighters, or friends that I grew up with in high school, the two Jeffs, you know, a Buddy and a Steve, and they all three of them ended up being in the fire service, and Stevie ended up being working for the sheriff's department. in law enforcement. But so we all kind of did that kind of work. And so he told me about this lot that came available. I was going to set up shop out in Lake County. My wife had been born in the Claremont Hospital, the old Claremont Hospital, and off of Highway 50, so she wasn't a stranger to West Orange County. She was born in Florida and grew up in Pine Hills and went to some of the same schools I went to, Teresa. And so we went and looked at it, and we signed on it and built a house. And it turns out I could see the city limit sign in Winter Garden from my driveway. So here, that's 22 years ago, not knowing that eventually that I would be here working for Winter Garden.
And how did that came about? Just eventually when you moved out to Winter Garden with the Winter Garden Fire Department?
Yeah, it was just again one of those things that was kind of meant to be. I was 47 years old. As I started young, I was 47 years old when I hit my 28-year anniversary with Orange County Fire Department. And I was moving up the kind of the food chain. I was the acting division chief of administration, which is third level chief from the top, and just kind of going along for the ride, and not really thinking at 47 about the future. And I told Teresa, my wife, I said, I'll at least slow down and we'll go talk to a financial advisor that advises fire department people. And he kind of like, where have you been? Because I'd already passed that 25-year mark. And I told him there was an opportunity in Winter Garden. He says, what are you waiting for? So kind of the light bulb went on at that point, and everything really changed. The whole focus changed. Chief John Williamson, who was the fire chief at the time, had actually been relentlessly kind of bugging me because he was out here as the fire chief, and he was coming to all the county meetings. And what a lot of people don't understand is all the fire departments in Orange County, there's 9 different fire departments within Orange County. When you look at Orlando and Orange County, the airport, Apopka, Ocoee, Winter Park, Winter Garden, Ocoee, Reedy Creek, Maitland, Winter Park. So there's a whole group of us, and they're all kind of talking, and we all share the same kind of medical director to keep us up on medical events. So I would see Chief Williamson at these meetings, and he'd catch me in the parking lot after. He says, hey man, I got a deputy fire chief job. I'd really need you to think about it. And quite honestly, 2 or 3 times I kind of just told him, I said, leave me alone. That's my retirement job. And because again, 47 years old, thinking retirement is 55, 65, yeah. So when Teresa and I went and kind of did a reevaluation and realized, oh, well, if you work for one job and you've already reached your retirement point there in that job, if you stay, you're really just kind of, I wasn't thinking about myself and my finances per se, but they said, you really need to think about this other opportunity. And the other selling point was I had another gentleman who worked my entire career with Parallel, was Bill Sullivan, and he retired several years ago as the deputy police chief here in Winter Garden. He used to come to the fire station and wash his car while I was a firefighter, and he was with the Orange County Sheriff's Department. And he had come out here a year or so before that job came open. And at one point I was talking to him, and he said, Matt, if you ever get an opportunity to come work for the city of Winter Garden, do not turn it down. And so kind of the...
They knew something, these folks.
Yeah.
They knew something.
So I took Chief Williamson up on his offer, and we started negotiating and a meeting with the city personnel, and that's how I ended up getting the job here in Winter Garden.
For the next career, yep, the next step up.
Yeah.
You can never say never at 47, right?
Right.
It's 20, 30 more years to go.
Right.
Yeah. Right. You got some shots along those years of some of the folks you
I'll see if I can find some of those to get to. But while we're talking about that, the one thing that was interesting about the timing of coming to Winter Garden was that they were in this, and you've probably heard this through the History Foundation, is that Hollis Holden, which was a previous city manager to Mike Bohofer, and Mayor Quisenberry, and then followed up by Mike Bohofer and Mayor Reese, they had a vision, as Winter Garden started to go through its regrowth to really try to professionalize, modernize the police and fire department in Winter Garden, in the city. and bring in some talent. They actually lowered initially the vesting time as an employee because, you know, if they may not get somebody to come in the door that they need to stay here 15 or 20 years to take the job. They vested it, they took it down to 10 years. And just to find somebody with experience like a Bill Sullivan or myself or Chief Williamson that was willing to come over and not spend, you know, an entire 30 years here, but make it something that was attractive.
Sure.
And so in that process, one of the things in the vision was to start paramedic services here in Winter Garden. And I had run the paramedic services, you know, EMS and paramedic services was kind of, I started so early on in 1980, 81 that, and when my history watching the paramedics work was really an interest to me, helping people. So I stayed in the EMS track in Orange County and eventually ran the EMS service as they started doing EMS transport, taking people to the hospital in fire department vehicles, you know, ambulances. And so when I got to Winter Garden, that was actually one of the things they did to kind of vet me out as a potential candidate. They asked me to write a plan and show them what it would take to train and recruit paramedics to basically get an advanced life support, which is the ability to start IVs and put down endotracheal tubes and advanced treatments.
In the field.
And so I wrote it up, you know, and I submitted to Chief Williamson and to Frank Gilbert, who was the HR director, assistant city manager, and they signed me on.
And that led to the fancy truck.
That led to the first truck that we were able to build, and I think we do have a picture of that.
Yeah,
so this is the first truck.
Yeah.
So I brought a picture of the first truck that I was involved in when I got here, and the last truck we'll see in a minute. But so this was what we call a transport capable advanced life support unit, and we built this in 2008 timeframe, and it actually was one of those things where when you work for a big department, it's hard to build a lot of things because it's exponential. You know, if you have 30 rescue trucks in your fleet and you want to add another $5,000 to it, that cost is kind of sticker shock. But if you're a small agency and you're going to build one truck that's going to serve you for 10 years, and it's the only truck you're going to build, the city had given me about $200,000 to build it. Back in 2008 timeframe was plenty of money to be innovative. So we put in some features on this truck, have to do with decontamination and things. So we're the first thing that had ever been done in the country. There's about 10 features on this truck that were very unique, and we were actually featured in Fire Chief magazine in 2010 for building a very safe and efficient ambulance.
I think I've seen that in person. They bring it, like I've seen it at the farmers market and different, they'll have the guys out there talking with the community. Yeah,
the crews here take real good care of it. So actually, this picture is a picture of the original cab, but it has been re-chassised. You take that box off the back and you put it on a new Ford F-450, and then that gets you to where you can use it for another 10 years or so.
Excellent.
But really, it turned out to be the best decision I could have ever made coming to Winter Garden. It was kind of what they needed at the time, and it turns out it re-energized me, and it was something I needed at the time.
Must have been, I mean, the city was growing, the area was growing so quickly, so they needed decisions. Hence the fewer vetting years, those years you said for waiting, from 25 down to 10, just to get things going. It's like the people all involved.
Oh yeah.
We're just realizing, this is going fast. We need to.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And the welcome here was incredible. To come to Winter Garden was. We can talk about this story here. One of the first things, because. The welcoming here was really so energetic to me for people bringing, I'm an outsider coming in per se, but because I had been in Orange County and been to a lot of the meetings, I think a lot of the crews in the field, they kind of already had an idea who Chief McGrew was. But at the same time, living here since 2000 when we moved into our house, our kids went to school here. They went to Lakeview Middle School and West Orange High School, and so we were able to kind of establish some inroads already. Our daughter was a dancer who danced right here on Plant Street at CDPA Dance Studio with Miss Catherine, and that led you to the connections. You know, I've seen your last 2 interviews here, you know, so we had a connection with Tim Keating, who built your building next door. You know, we had a connection with Dr. Kappelman, his daughter danced there. The old owners of Downtown Brown, you know, Eric and Claire Brown, their daughter danced with our daughter Madison, and the Ropers, you know. So when you look at those connections, those were helpful because I already knew those people, and they kind of already knew me.
Yeah, socialize, even if you didn't grow up with them necessarily. Right. Socialize, the kids bring everyone together, yeah.
And then when I walked in the door, actually before I even got here, I had already signed the paperwork, and the crews were reaching out to me, and I was talking back and forth, and they said that they were thinking about rebranding, you know, the fire service, and they were transitioning in the fire service a lot of fire trucks like you have here, the older fire trucks. You know, you had like this one that you have out here.
54 LaFrance.
Yeah, the way they were set up, a lot of times they just had wording on the side of the truck, or just say Winter Garden Fire
Winter
Department.
Garden 1, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So there was it was the kind of the thought processes. A lot of the fire department was transitioning to creating an eye-catching logo, not just a patch. And so I started back and forth with them before I even got here. And we started, you know, I met Bill Rosenfeld, who was, he's now the assistant chief, and but he was kind of their IT guy, and he was playing with some diagrams. And I met Sean Kelly, who's now the deputy fire chief for Winter Garden. And he said, you know what we need to do? We need to introduce you to Andy Crabtree.
There you go.
And so I met Andy Crabtree and Dan Yates, and that's where this picture, where you see the picture of Chief Williamson and myself, and this is when we rolled out the evolution of the patch. And you know, originally they wanted to put, you know, big fire department stuff on there, and I started thinking, you know, I said, really, you know, what makes Winter Garden, and what do people think of when they think of Winter Garden? They think of Lake Apopka, and they think of the citrus industry. Mm-hmm. And so we, you know, then we went to task, and over several gyrations, this was the end result.
Got your clock tower.
They all voted on it, and they decided this was it. And so basically, we wanted to make sure that when we pulled up on the scene, they just didn't see the fire department was there. They needed to know that it was Winter Garden Fire Department that was there.
Fire and rescue with all your symbols, EMT, fire. Yeah, it stands out.
Yeah. So,
speaking of those logos, you clarified something, and I think a lot of people are curious too. If we can do like an aside, the RF and the F logos, you had something to do with making those standard. Can you explain to the folks what that actually, when they see those?
Yeah, I know I don't have a lot of time, but it's an interesting story in that, you know, I think I gave you some notes. We talked about line of duty deaths.
Yeah.
And then
those 3 symbols that you were showing.
Yeah, and Winter Garden, we've had 2 line of duty deaths. In our history, we had one in 1981, which was Stuart Baker, who died at the scene of a fire in Tildenville. Yeah. And he had a sudden cardiac arrest. And then in 2009, we had one of our firefighters when I was here, Omar Martinez, who worked his shift, got off in the morning to celebrate Memorial Day, and went off with his family just hours after getting off shift and had a sudden cardiac arrest, and he died as well. So there's a tie there, because both of these gentlemen, even though one was at a fire and one was had just got off shift, sudden cardiac death, right? So that's something we can maybe allude to later on, but those were our 2 line of duty deaths. So Stuart Baker is buried right here in the Winter Garden Cemetery, and Omar is buried out in Claremont. And then leading to these symbols, in Orange County, we've had a series of line of duty deaths. I think there's about 6 line of duty deaths that have occurred over the history of Orange County Fire Rescue, which was established in 1981. But the 2 that stand out and affected me the most were Todd Aldridge and Mark Benge, who were killed in the Sunrise Gift Shop fire in February 24th, 1989. And there was 3 firefighters who went in a building to attack a fire that was in the roof, and because that's how we that's how we did it. They could see, they could see through the building, so they thought it was safe to go in. And once they got in, they opened up the ceiling to see where the fire was, and there was the air that was introduced created like a fire explosion, and the roof caved in on them. And one firefighter got knocked back towards the edge of the building more, and the other 2, Todd and Mark, they were pinned and they died in the fire. The third firefighter, Richard Marcotte, he was able to make his way to a window, and this was basically almost a glass shell of a building with metal supports, and bust his way out of an exit door, which was chained, illegally chained closed. But in that, everything we've learned since 1989, that's, like I said, that's tactically, that's how we did things. But the thing that impacted me the most is these were 2 friends of mine. I had come to know Mark Binge through Valencia. I was a teacher out there, and I got to know him as a student and then as a Orange County firefighter paramedic. Todd, though, had come to work at our station in Orla Vista, and we felt like we kind of raised Todd, and he got promoted to engineer, and he got moved out to the station out by Lake Buena Vista, and that's where this fire occurred on Palm Parkway, which is in the area of Disney Village. And so because of that fire, we've tried to make sure that their deaths, weren't in vain, and to try to show the family our commitment, to make something positive out of it. And we've made so many strides in that effort. There has a state law about the 2 in, 2 out, meaning there has to be 2 firefighters. If 2 firefighters go in, there have to be 2 firefighters outside ready to rescue those 2 firefighters. We send an extra command officer to the rear of the building so they can have an extra set of eyes in the back of the building, communication, command, and things like that. And sometimes things like this just happen out of kind of the being in the right place at the right time. This particular sign that you saw is what they call a lightweight truss marker. And years after Todd and Mark were killed in the fire, I got a phone call from somebody in South Florida. So I can't really take credit for really any of this. It's just the connection. So in 2007, there was a terrible fire in Charleston, South Carolina. That was the Super Sofa fire. 9 Charleston firefighters were killed in a structure that was a wide-span, lightweight truss structure. So these 2 gentlemen with 2 fire departments in South Florida, lightweight truss roof material, lightweight truss material, was Cedar Hammock Fire Rescue and Southern Manatee. These 2 gentlemen had seen everything that happened as a result of the Charleston fire, and they wanted to somehow notify and warn firefighters of those types of buildings. So they started a grassroots effort through their local representatives and state senators, and then they put the word out throughout the state of Florida of gathering information, and that's how we got notified. And I got connected with them, and then once they heard the story of Todd and Mark, and it was a lightweight truss system, then they allowed me, and with the blessing of the families, to pursue being a part of that. So eventually myself and another fire inspector from Orange County, I was working for Winter Garden at the time in 2008. They allowed myself and a fire inspector, Carl Weaver from Orange County, to join those 2 gentlemen from South Florida fire departments and go to Tallahassee and testify in front of the legislature to make this a priority. And in 2009, it was made into law, and it's actually called the Aldridge-Bench Firefighter Safety Act.
Help bring it home.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
sure.
so what it does, it really just shows, it gives you a second warning. So when our crews pull up to these buildings, so now these people that see these red signs on these buildings throughout Winter Garden will know that it's really a way to tell the firefighters when they arrive on the scene, instead of just saying, I have fire from the roof, they can say, I have fire from the roof of a lightweight truss structure, because they've seen the sign.
And the F is for floor, I guess you
Yes,
told me?
because you could have a building that's up off of the ground, and they could have a lightweight floor, they can have a lightweight roof, and if it's a combination, it'll be an RF. So that's
I was curious about that.
and that pays tribute to
Sure.
Mark and Todd, and
Sure.
you know, I've been fortunate to stay in contact with Todd's family. His parents just live right here, relocated to Winter Garden just a year or so ago.
So something they, yeah,
Something good came from.
Yeah,
It's hard
and
to say that, but you
no,
know,
it is,
something good came from their efforts.
And we had a celebration for them 16 years after they died. That the owner of the Florida Hotel by the Florida Mall.
Mm-hmm.
So he wanted to dedicate his ballrooms to Todd and Mark. And so if you ever go to the Florida Mall Hotel, go to the second floor, and you'll see their bronze plaque.
Nice.
And it was a great tribute from the business community to do that. And so, you know, when you stand in front of those, and I was one of the MCs for that, and when you stand in front of the families, you have to, you know, you want to be able to show them what has transpired and the changes that have been made due to their sacrifices.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. It's they're on the front lines,
And you know,
They're
and some
right
family
there.
members, you know, they, you know, after they lose a loved one, they may go a different direction, and some stay connected. It's, you know, it's everybody's different.
yeah,
And,
exactly. You never
but
know how you're gonna.
like Todd's sister, she still goes to the fire station once a year, and out at SeaWorld, she lives out by SeaWorld and has a nice lunch with them and stays connected with them. And Omar's wife, Elena, has relocated from Claremont, and she lives in Winter Garden. So it's kind of nice to stay connected with those people.
It's definitely a close-knit community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more, something that might, some of the photos might jog some other things you might want to tell us about.
Specific to Winter Garden, you know, we had,
Yeah.
when I got here, it took us just about a year to get our advanced life support license. So that was a big milestone to get that, and we put our first ambulance in service in December 2007. And then by 2011, I had enough people trained in the city as paramedics to where we were able to actually put paramedics on every rolling unit. So our fire trucks and the tower truck and the rescue truck. So that's an important thing for people to understand, is when a fire truck pulls up in front of your house and you've called because somebody's having chest pain, let them in the door. They carry all the equipment to be able to diagnose and treat, you know, every type of illness, the same equipment that would be in the emergency room. And we've been able to do this since 2011.
That is, it's just so, I mean, there's so much, people think, okay, there's a fire, you folks put out fires. It's so much more than that. And there's not fires every 5 minutes.
No.
And there's EMT, well, you know, there's emergency medical services needed pretty often.
Yeah.
But there's such a community outreach as well. You all do so much, you know, besides firefighting and EMT work. Like just hands-on community things, like you were talking about, the Honor Guard, the 9/11 Memorial Steel piece set up over there, the Santa Run. I mean, you know, it's history. It's like a living history that you guys are actively involved in.
Yeah, so that section, we're talking about just the things that we've been able to kind of reconnect with the community here in Winter Garden. When I took over as fire chief in 2014, that was really one of the things I really wanted to do, was learn more about the history. And not only that, we had, you know, fire chiefs that were still living, you know, amongst us. Not only Chief Williamson, who hired me, who's now the fire chief out at the International Airport, but Roy Labossiere, which was a fire chief, and he actually was one of the people that I actually went to training with at the fire academy, and then here I come find out he was a fire chief in Winter Garden. And then prior to Chief Williamson was Randy Dollar, and
that name we hear a lot locally.
yeah, and I think I got pardon me for flipping here.
No, that's okay.
So here's a picture of Randy Dollar.
There's Randy Dollar.
And that was just happenstance. He'd kind of fallen off the radar a little bit. He went out on a medical. He had MS. So, you know, if this was your lifeblood and this is what drove you, and then to have a disease take you away from what you loved, you know, he kind of stayed away from the fire service a while. just in contact. But when I took over as the fire chief, I said it was kind of a thing I wanted to do. When I brought Chief Gayanza on as my deputy fire chief from Orange County, we created a newsletter. So I wanted to reach out and find out who the players were and where they were. And so I found out that Randy Dollar, Chief Dollar, had been in the hospital at Health Central. And I didn't know how he would receive that, but I just showed up one day. And I saw his family, and I asked if I could come in, and it was the best thing. We had an hour long just talking about the past and his vision and how he left the fire department better off than when he found it.
Yeah, exactly.
And we kind of developed.
Appreciated that.
Yeah, we developed a bond with him, and I stay in touch with his family now to this day. We lost him in 2020. And yeah, 2020 was kind of a strange year, with COVID kicking in. He passed away early in 2020, so we were actually able to give him a nice send-off and full fire department honors. And I know that was something that, and that's kind of like, we talked about the honor guard, that came into play. And so the other one that I was able to kind of reconnect with was Chief Pete Peters, and I think his real name was Carl R. Peters, but he went all the way back to being the 4th fire chief. This is 1962 to 1965. So so I reached out to his family. I found out he was right over here at Quality Healthcare, and again, this was right before COVID, and there was, had to get approval to go in there, and they said, yeah, come on in and talk to him, and what a conversation we had.
Nice.
Back in those days, you have a lot of history about Hoyle Pounds and how he was a second fire chief, but he was the longest serving fire chief,
right, yeah,
40 years, because that guy, he had Pounds Motor. And back in the city history, almost every employee that had some kind of connection to vehicles or fleet or anything like that, they were automatically pretty much assumed they were going to be a volunteer firefighter.
Yeah.
The bell would ring in his office,
and
his employees would go. And same thing with Pete. Chief Peters, he had a West Orange Auto Sales, I think it was. He had a cab business at one time, trying to make ends meet. And he was at a time when the city volunteers were all volunteers. And the neatest story he told me was that he didn't really want to be the fire chief. But he was a mechanic, so he kind of was already invested into the fire department, and the firefighters, the volunteers, were a little upset with the city because they had a rule. A lot of volunteer fire departments work off of a pay per call. Like the city will give you a little stipend. They realize you're not a salaried employee, but they might pay you $5 or $10 for a call.
Bills from Hoyle Pounds.
Yeah, so they wouldn't give the volunteers a stipend for going on a call in the city.
Right.
They'd give them a stipend for going on a call outside the city, and it really kind of angered a lot of the volunteers, and they were all starting to quit. And so they asked Pete Peters if he would go to bat for him and be the fire chief, and he was kind of the only one that was willing to do it. And he stood up for him. He didn't mince words. And the story he told me was the funniest story was he was trying to get the guys to come back to work, and the city manager at the time, and I couldn't even tell you who the name of that city manager was mad about that, and that he heard that Chief Peters was telling him he wasn't supporting them. Yeah. And he drove up on Pete Peters as he was standing outside the fire station and started giving him, kind of a line of the way things were going to be. And Pete said, I hauled off and I punched him in the face. And he said, I just knew my employment with the city of Winter Garden was over at that time. But he said, everybody had run-ins with this city manager. So he went back and he said he waited for the phone to ring, and they called and said, you've got the job, and the city manager has resigned.
Wow.
No explanation, and so that's just the kind of, way back then, it's, I give so much credit. That's why I wanted to get, kind of recontact some of these people, for all those people who made the Winter Garden Fire Department what it is today.
You can aid and abut our files with information that
So
you've got.
just in that time
absolutely.
frame from me taking over in 2014, we lost 2 of our former fire chiefs, and then we, the oldest fire chief now that I stay in contact with is Jim Briggs.
Jim Briggs,
He's
sure.
out in Groveland with his wife, and he's still involved with the Antique Fire Department group, and so I reconnected with them, and then like you said, we got the honor guard squared away, and one of the neat things that Chief Williamson started, and I was able to finish, would have been the when we got the 9/11 steel. And that was a whole process. You know, after 9/11 in
Yes.
2001, after they had basically stored and cataloged a lot of the debris from the Twin Towers, they started trying to figure out what they could do with it. And they wanted to make it educational and accessible to the public all over the country. So they had a process where fire departments all over the country could put in a request to get a piece of steel from the 9/11 storage. And it had to be guaranteed that it had to be accessible to the public on display. You couldn't make money off of it. And basically,
so.
yeah. And so Chief Williamson at the time, and part of the Central Florida Fire Chiefs Association group, we had a gentleman, and he was a retired FDNY firefighter, and he was on part of our membership. And he knew the people to get a hold of. So some departments got, you know, a little piece of something, you know, that we'd have to kind of figure out what it was. Winter Garden, we got a 700-pound piece of steel I-beam
From the,
Yeah.
from the tower.
from the
first
tower.
Yeah.
And a group of volunteers, Brian Sanders, our battalion chief, I think James Cox, a detective for Winter Garden Police Department, Belle Isle police officer, and then Jimmy Brown, who actually was a recruit firefighter at Station 10 at the base of the Twin Towers when the attack happened. He had relocated to Winter Garden, and they all took a pickup truck up there, and they brought the steel back. And we had the steel for several years until we finally got with a final plan to put that in the park space behind our fire headquarters there.
That's
at
the
1
one
East
down
Cypress
on,
Street.
Oh, yeah, sure. Down
Off Main.
Off Main.
Yeah,
off
right up on Main
Yes,
Street.
that's
So
right.
1 East Cypress Street, and that's where I encourage people to go by and see that and touch it, because that's a lot of people relocate from up north, and it's a nice tribute to have here for the police, fire, and EMS that all, and Port Authority, that lost their lives on 9/11.
Yeah, I knew I was up there. Well, no, I was down here, but I'm from Brooklyn, from New York. And first of all, I can't believe it's been 20 years already. And I knew a lot of folks involved in many ways that day. And you don't forget. You don't
No.
forget. This is very nice of them to
Yeah.
do this in Winter Garden.
What else can we talk about?
Well, something that really struck me, I think we both got a little emotional discussing it the other day, the keeping everyone safe, everyone goes home. Tell me about that. That just really gets to me.
I'll see if I can pull it up on, if we can see it on the side of the fire truck. Let's look at this picture real quick. I had a picture of Jim Briggs. Uh-oh, shouldn't have done that. So, you mentioned the logo. It's kind of a saying we put on the side of our fire trucks.
Keeping everyone safe, everyone goes home.
Yeah, so when you take over a job
Yeah.
of being the fire chief, you kind of wonder what can you add to an organization that has been, you know, kind of over 100 years old. And, you know, one thing that I didn't have to do ever when I got here as deputy chief and as fire chief is you know, motivate the personnel. They had a good reputation of being one of the hardest workers. You couldn't, I don't think you could outwork them on a fire. They go to training. They were the first ones to go in and the last ones to leave and clean up, and I would get contact from the fire academy all the time about that. So That they didn't need anything. I think what I brought was the kind of the roadmap to, where we're going to go and how we can sustain this and in the future. And so that being said, we two things I did. I established kind of the 4 pillars of the fire service that we're going to basically be. This is a picture of Jim Briggs. You want to show that real quick?
That's Jim Briggs, yeah.
Okay, and then I'll go to that picture. So this, it's hard to see on this picture because it's very small, but above the rear tires, you'll see that saying, keeping everyone safe, everyone goes home. And that was the second thing. So my 4 pillars for the organization were basically respect. It weren't the traditional ones you hear about honor and honesty and those kind of things. There was really 4 things that I'd seen over my career that I thought were the most important things. One is respect where you came from, who you're dealing with, respect your coworkers, respect the city government, your officers, your coworkers, respect the part each one plays. The union, we have a union, they're a great partnership there.
About humans.
Oh yeah,
about
relationships.
people.
That's my saying. They've heard me say it 100 times. Life is about relationships. The second pillar was safety, and because of Todd and Mark's death and the line of duty death we had when I came in the door, obviously you never want to be the fire chief that has to live through a line of duty death. So safety was an important one for me. And then I had readiness was one, with preparation basically. And the last one, oh no, see that's what I get. Training was my 4th bullet. Preparation is, did you get to work on time? Would you do everything you could to be prepared for that alarm to go off?
Did you have respect for your job?
Yes, and so, but training is all that stuff you can quantify on a piece of paper. I went to school, I got this certificate, I trained how to pull this hose line, that kind of stuff. So yeah, those were my 4 pillars. And the last thing I did, not the last thing, but I mean one of the first things I did as fire chief was I took, kind of tied into safety. For the last 15, 20 years, we had been averaging 100 firefighter deaths across the country, line of duty deaths. And I believe that's, although we celebrate firefighters and law enforcement officers as hero, I don't believe that's a badge of honor because of what I've seen with Todd and Mark and the things we can do to help prevent that. So I was very safety conscious. So the National Fire Service came out with the slogan, everyone goes home. And that was a way to kind of tell everybody to kind of pause and think about everything we do, whether it's training or a call, how do we make sure everybody goes home? So then when I took over as fire chief, I thought, not that I can't make that any better, but what I can do is I can make it a challenge to the community and to my coworkers and people around me is keeping everyone safe, everyone goes home. So I can, when I go to talk to a business, I can say, how are we keeping everyone safe? Because if you keep your exit ways clear and everybody in your business has a fire alarm and gets out of the building and the firefighters get there and everything's clean and orderly and we can get in and out, guess what? Everybody goes home. Your employees goes home, our employees go home. That applies to your house, your smoke alarms, schools, every business. So we figured if we put that on the side of the fire truck, and that might spark a conversation that says, what does that mean? And then all of our crews can say, it means that we all need to do our part. And if we do that, we all get to go home at the end of our shift.
All that prevention and training and safety, everyone goes home. I remember they used to, in grammar school, firemen would visit.
Oh yeah.
And he would tell us, everyone's a fire preventer. Everyone should be a fire prevention specialist, even you kids.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's all about, just like you say, keeping everyone safe, everyone goes home. Start that at an early age.
I think how are we doing on time there?
We're like 48 minutes. We're about 48 minutes, I think, right?
Okay. This was a picture of Chief Labossiere as well. And I think one thing we talked about the other day was being able to bring people into this career and give them a lifelong career, with changing the department from a stepping stone fire department, a small organization, making it a destination fire department. So the Chief Labossiere had come in to give Chief Swope, one of our battalion chiefs, and he also retired in 2020, 30 years. And I had another battalion chief, Brian Sanders, retire in 2020 with 30 years.
Talked to him a
so
couple of
two
times,
pillars of the organization, but Chief Swope was a second generation city employee. His dad was with the utilities and water department.
That's what he was.
And he was kind of he was brought into the fire service too, because his interesting thing about him, he was a polio survivor. He's one of the few people who actually had lived on an iron lung and was able to get off the iron lung and live a full and productive life. So that's a kind of unique story. And then I was able to hire his son before I left the fire as a fire chief. So third generation city employee. Wilson Swope, his son, is now on duty at Winter Garden Fire Rescue.
And people know these names of these chiefs.
Oh, sure,
They know these family names locally.
A lot of community tie-in. You know, Chris Baker, one of our lieutenants, he basically lived with the Crabtrees. Jimmy Crabtree, the Cancer Fund. Jimmy Crabtree was his best friend. Yeah. So I mean, it's just amazing
a lot of
how
connection.
how interconnected it is.
It's true. A lot of support.
Yeah. So. I don't know, what's
Anything
next?
you want to add on what it, as the city grows exponentially, you think I'm sure you've got confidence in the future of the department.
Oh, absolutely.
When you want to be I've always thought this, men and women who want to be firefighters, they're such dedicated people. You know, they're good people, you know? To want to be a firefighter, there's got to be something so good about you to want to do that.
Yeah, it's a great profession. It's one of those things where, fortunately, unfortunately, in our society right now, we're still the good guys. You know, that at 3 o'clock in the morning, they don't care, you know, the color of your skin or why you called. There's always going to be somebody who doesn't know something to do, and they're going to call 911, and then we're going to respond. Right. And so that's what makes it such a great job. And I think the last thing, one of the last things I would point out is that the biggest thing that changed, you know, in my 42 years in the fire service is the building construction. You talk about growth. Is you know, when I was hired 42 years ago, we had what we call legacy construction. You know, houses were built with 2x6 rafters, and the wood furniture was wood and cotton, and so the best way to kind of an example would be a bedroom fire 42 years ago, it would still be a bedroom fire at 30 minutes. A bedroom fire today in 2022 will have been outside of that bedroom and start consuming the entire house in 3 minutes. Wow. So it went from legacy construction to almost kind of a life-threatening, and that's really why it's so important that everybody have their smoke alarms to give you the warning to get out.
Folks.
To give you the warning.
Check them once a year on your birthday, or even sooner.
Yep.
Check them on everybody's birthdays.
Every time the time changes. That way you're doing it twice a year.
Yeah.
And so that was the biggest take-home message. And then changes-wise, you know, was really the fire itself. You know, didn't so much change, but the rapid intensity of the fires changed, which made the behavior of the fire and going to school and get your education even more important to calculate what's happening.
All those new materials and chemicals
But you know, Winter Garden does a great job with the growth. People don't realize all that goes on behind the scenes before they see something come out of the ground. I know it's hard to believe that people think we're just growing leaps and bounds, but one good example that I've shared with people when they bring that up is you don't know how many times Winter Garden has said no to an apartment complex. You don't have to look any further than Ocoee one side and to Claremont on the other side and realize in the 14 years I was here with the fire service, there had been like 10 apartment complexes built in either side of us here in Winter Garden. And in Winter Garden, we only had one complex built. And that was 22 apartments right here in downtown. And of course, now there's newer ones coming up, but that's because of the Winter Garden, you know, administration trying to decide they're focused on family and family home ownership and investment in the community. So it's huge.
Thoughtful growth.
So it's a great place to be a part of that community.
You've seen a lot. You've seen a lot of change.
Yeah,
I
I give a lot of credit to, you know, obviously my wife and my family for basically, you know, putting up with. There's a picture of the gang. We got a new grandchild that's not in this picture, but keeping us, supporting me for all those hours and
Yeah.
the missed meals and things like that on the spur of the moment. But there was a lot of people along the way that basically raised me. I say, that's their words, not mine, from that know-it-all,
that kid, 19-year-old and all of
that's making trouble, that's a handful to be, kind of a responsible fire chief and continue to grow this great fire department here in Winter Garden.
It's so good to hear. It is,
and
it's
they're in
very
good hands.
great.
Chief Gaenza, who I brought over 6 years ago, I had worked my entire career with him in Orange County, so I kind of knew what we were getting. And that's what Mike Bohofer wanted to make sure that we were bringing in people that could actually kind of take over, get the right people on the bus, as you were.
Passion for the
And
area.
the other neat thing was in my retiring and deciding to go ahead and retire and not stay till I was like 65, is you get to actually see the succession of your department and all you're pushing everybody to get their education. So after I left now, Chief Gaenza took over as the fire chief, and he was able to but he was actually promote within their deputy fire chief, Sean Kelly, their assistant chief, Bill Rosenfeld. These are guys who've been with the organization and part of this community for 15 and 20 years
It's like
already.
you're helping them watch out.
Yeah, so that succession only happens when the old farts like me, retire and get out of the
Time
way.
marches on.
And they're doing a great job.
Mike, do we get any questions? Anyone have any questions? We're good?
Nice comments.
That's good. Yeah, great. Excellent. Anything else you would like to add as we close? This has been really educational in so many ways. Thank you so much. You've brought like a humanity to it. Like I say, it's not just red trucks and sirens going down the street with people saying, now what? There's a whole world behind it.
Oh, yeah.
Totally. Yeah, this has been great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It's time to start traveling again. And,
That's
spending
true.
time with my wife and grandkids and
Yep, I'm looking forward to hanging out with the buddies on just a beach somewhere.
yeah.
Nice and quiet. Well, folks, thank you again, and thank you to Matt McGrew for a very informative session. We really appreciate it. Check with us as we go month to month with, we're going to be expanding as we become healthier and safer. So stay in touch with us on our Facebook page, on the website, and come visit us at the Winter Garden Heritage Museum, the Central Florida Railroad Museum, the Heritage Foundation Archive. We have so much to share. A lot of fire department history. We have photo albums for like 18 inches thick with so many great photos. And I'd like to also thank again Mike Forrester, our Winter Garden Heritage Foundation VP, who keeps us looking good and sounding good. Thank you, Mike, so much. And all those 3 facilities are open right now, Tuesdays through Saturdays from 11 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon. So come see us. Once again, thanks for joining us. See you soon, and good night.